Elara, a woman of quiet habits and sharp eyes, a woman who smelled of cinnamon and flour, not gunpowder and fear. Elara owned the Gilded Spoon, a small cafe in a sleepy seaside town. It was her sanctuary, her new life. For 7 years she bingeed. Elara, the kind woman who baked the best scones, and knew everyone. Coffee order. Elara, the woman with the easy smile and the scars on her back, she said were from a childhood accident. The lies were easier than the truth. The truth was a ghost that haunted her, a ghost that kept her awake some nights. The bell above the door chimed. It was a beautiful afternoon. The sun was slanting through the large front window, making the dust motes dance a golden ballet. The gentle hum of conversation filled the air, the clink of teacups, the soft scrape of chairs. It was a symphony of peace, a melody she'd fought a war to earn. Elara was wiping down the counter, a contented smile on her face when the chime sounded again. But this time it wasn't gentle or friendly. It was a harsh metallic clang followed by the sound of glass shattering. 3 men in black ski masks burst through the door, the winter sun glinting off the barrels of their assault rifles. The symphony of peace died in a single collective gasp. The conversations stopped, the teacups froze mid-air, the children in the corner went silent. Elara's heart hammered a frantic drumbeat, but her mind was cold and still. It was an old feeling, a familiar feeling, a welcome feeling in a strange way. Her hands stopped moving, the cloth still in her grip. Her eyes scanning the room, assessing the threats, the exits, the potential weapons. The cafe was no longer a cafe, it was a killbox. Everyone on the floor now. One of the men barked, his voice distorted by the mask, a hollow menace. He pointed his rifle at a young couple holding hands by the window. The man pulled the woman down, covering her with his body, a brave but foolish act. Elara noticed the way the masked man held his weapon, the way his finger rested just so on the trigger, his stance. It wasn't the stance of a desperate robber or a crazed lunatic. It was the posture of a trained professional, an operative, an elite soldier, her kind. Her stomach tightened, a knot of dread. She knew what this meant. They had come for the till, they had come for the jewelry. They came for her, for the woman she used to be. Her new life was over. She'd known this day might come. She'd hoped it would, and she'd prayed it wouldn't. It didn't matter now. All that mattered was survival and protecting the innocent people in her cafe. She wasn't just Elara the baker anymore. She was back to being a ghost, a phantom, a killer. One of the men, the tallest one, with a scar above his right eye, a scar that looked remarkably like her own. Elara froze for a fraction of a second. His eyes met hers through the mask, a moment of silent recognition. "Where is it, Raven?" he said, his voice a low growl, the name hitting her like a physical blow. The air grew thick with unspoken history. Raven was a name she hadn't heard in 7 years, a name she'd buried under layers of flour and sugar, of new friendships and new beginnings. Raven was a ghost she'd put to rest for good, but now the ghost was back and it was hungry. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice calm and steady. "A lie," she'd told 1,000 times before, a lie that felt like a truth. She slowly put the cloth on the counter and straightened her apron. "This is a cafe, sir. We're just trying to get through the day." The tall man laughed, a humorless short bark of a sound. "Do you play coy, Raven? We know what you took, we know what you hid. It's in here somewhere. Give it to us, and maybe we let these civilians walk out of here, maybe." He gestured to the terrified customers huddled on the floor. The elderly woman clutching her heart, the young father shielding his daughter. Elara's gaze hardened, a fire lighting in her eyes, a dangerous fire she thought was long gone. "You won't hurt them," she said. It was not a question, it was a promise, a threat. He looked at her a long moment, his head tilted, as if appraising her, as if wondering if the years had softened her, if she was still the killer he remembered. "Don't bet on it," he said, and he took a step towards the young couple, his boot stopping just inches from the woman's face, a cruel, playful taunt. That was all the motivation she needed. Elara moved, a blur of motion. She grabbed a Castian frying pan from the rack above the counter and swung it, a swift, devastating arc, a silent, lethal strike. The heavy pan connected with the third man's head, the one who was unpaying attention. His skull making a sickening, thudding sound, and he dropped like a stone unconscious. The tall man's head whipped around, a look of surprise on his face. "Raven," he whispered, a hint of admiration in his voice. "You haven't lost your touch." "Get out of my cafe," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "Get out of my town, get out of my life." He just smiled, a slow, cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes, and he raised his rifle. Elara dived behind the counter just as he fired, a line of bullet holes appearing in the antique coffee machine behind her. The cafe was no longer her sanctuary, it was a battlefield. She slid along the floor, her movements fluid and silent, a ghost in the wreckage of her own life. She grabbed a meat cleaver from the butcher block, her fingers wrapping around the handle, a familiar weight, an old friend. She knew this feeling, the adrenaline, the focus, the clarity. It was a high-stakes chess game, and she was the queen. She didn't want to be the queen, but could hear the tall man yelling orders to his remaining partner, check the kitchen, go, go, go. The second man went into the kitchen, a tense silence followed, and then the sound of a struggle. Alara slipped out from behind the counter, her eyes darting around the room. The tall man was standing by the door, covering his partner. He didn't see her. She was a whisper, a shadow, a memory of a killer. She crept up behind him, the meat cleaver held low, and he spun around a little too slow, a little too late. She wasn't aiming to kill, not yet, not if she didn't have to. Her goal was to disarm him, to incapacitate him. She feinted with the cleaver, a quick move to his left, and as he moved to block, she kicked his knee, his rifle clattering to the floor. The sound was deafening in the sudden silence of the cafe. He recovered quickly, a flash of movement, and a small knife was in his hand. An old trick, a last resort. Ella knew it. She'd taught it to him. He lunged at her, a desperate move, but she was faster, she was better, her hands a blur of motion, a block, a pivot, a kick to his wrist, and the knife flew out of his hand and landed with a soft clatter on the floor. He staggered back, his eyes wide with a mix of fury and disbelief. "You're an amateur now," she said, her voice full of a cold contempt that even she didn't know she still had. He snarled in response, "No, I am the master, you are just a ghost, a faded copy of the real thing." A sentiment she was very familiar with. He charged again, this time unarmed, a desperate charge, and Alara met him head-on with a series of quick blows to his pressure. Points, strikes, she'd learned years ago, a long time ago. He dropped to his knees, gasping his body a dead weight. "Tell me where it is, Raven, where did you hide it?" he pleaded, his voice weak, his mask askew. Alara knelt down, her face inches from his. She pulled his mask off his face, revealing a man she knew, a man she loved once, a man she detrained, a man she thought was dead. "I didn't hide it, I gave it away," she lied, a cold, calculated lie, a bluff. She stood up, leaving him a broken man. "Now get out of my cafe before I finish what you started," she said, her voice echoing in the ruined room. "And you not getting a to-go box." He just looked at her, a look of utter defeat on his face. And then he turned and left the cafe, a broken man. The other two men were on the floor, one knocked out, the other moaning softly. The silence that followed was deafening. Alara stood there, her chest heaving, the cleaver still in her hand. As the customers slowly started to rise from the floor, the woman from the couple was crying silently, her husband comforting her. Alara looked at the scene, the overturned tables, the broken windows, the bullet holes, the terrified faces of her customers, the ruined cafe, the sanctuary she had built with so much effort. The life she had made for herself had been shattered in a single afternoon. The ghost was back, and it had brought its friends. A young man, a busboy named Leo, who Alara had always been fond of, was staring at her with wide eyes, a mix of fear and admiration on his face. "What was that, Alara?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Alara put the cleaver on the counter, her hands shaking for the first time. That, she said, her voice quiet, was a secret that is no longer a secret. The police arrived, a flurry of flashing lights and sirens. Alara, a woman of quiet habits and sharp eyes, a woman who smelled of cinnamon and flour, was now a woman being questioned by the police, a woman who had just fought a battle in her own kitchen. The lies were easier than the truth, and the truth was a story she didn't want to tell. The truth was a dangerous game, a game she thought she retired from. Alara told them a story, a simple story of self-defense, of a brave woman fighting off robbers with a frying pan and a meat cleaver. She was a hero to the town, but to herself, she was just a woman whose past had finally caught up to her. The cafe was a wreck, a shell of what it once was. But Alara knew what she had to do. She had to rebuild the cafe, and she had to rebuild her life. But this time she wouldn't run, this time she would be ready. She was unjust Alara the baker, she was Alara the fighter, Alara the protector, a woman who had found a new purpose. The ghost was no longer a ghost. It was a reality she had to live with. The past was no longer the past, it was the present, and the future, a future she would face with a cleaver in one hand and a frying pan in the other, and a smile on her face, because after all, the gilded spoon would reopen. The day after the storm, Alara stood in the wreckage of her cafe. A police officer, a kind man with tired eyes, named Sergeant Miller, had just left. The town had rallied around her, offering to help rebuild. Alara, a woman of quiet habits and sharp eyes, had been the talk of the town, a hero, a legend. But her mind was still on the tall man and his words. "Where is it, Raven?" his voice a low growl. "We know what you took." She hadn't lied, she hadn't given it away, she had hidden it. A small microchip no bigger than her thumbnail hidden in a decorative spoon, a spoon she had hung on the wall, a spoon that was now gone. A small piece of her past, a small piece of a weapon, a small piece of a secret, a small piece of a truth she had wanted to bury. The tall man, her former partner, her former lover, had taken the spoon. He had taken her secret, a secret she had thought she had buried a long time ago. Alara felt a pang of a feeling she had not felt in years, a feeling of fear, a feeling of regret, a feeling of loss, but also a feeling of clarity. She knew what she had to do now. She had to rebuild her cafe, but she also had to retrieve her secret, a secret that could get her killed, a secret that could get her new friends killed. She looked at Leo, her young busboy who was helping her clean up. The look of admiration on his face had been replaced with a look of worry. "What are we going to do, Alara?" he asked, his voice soft, a voice full of a newfound trust, a trust she did not deserve, a trust she had to live up to. "We are going to rebuild," she said, her voice firm, "and we are going to be ready for the next time." Because there would be a next time. She knew that there would be a next time, and she would be ready. She was Raven, a woman of many secrets, and she was ready for the storm. Alara's gaze drifted to the front door, a gaping hole where the glass once was a sign above it, the gilded spoon now swinging precariously in the breeze. It was a mess, a disaster, a testament to a life she had tried to escape, but it was also a sign of a new beginning, a beginning she would face with courage, with strength, and with a deep determination. Alara, the woman of quiet habits and sharp eyes, was ready for a fight she had to win, a fight she would win. The town had rallied around her, and donations started pouring in. A GoFundMe page had been set up, a local news crew was on site, filming the devastation and the community support. It was a feel-good story, a hero story, a story Alara was not comfortable with. She was not a hero, she was a killer, a trained operative, a ghost of a past she wanted to escape. She was a woman of many secrets, but she was also a woman who was ready to fight for her new life, for her new friends, for her new family. She was ready for the next time. She stood in the ruins of her cafe, her hands on her hips, a look of fierce determination on her face. She was a woman who had once been a ghost, but now she was a reality that was ready to face the ghosts of her past, a reality that was ready for the storm. She was ready. Alara took a deep breath, her chest heaving, her heart beating, a steady drumbeat of resolve. She looked at Leo and she smiled, a genuine smile, a smile that reached her eyes, a smile that showed the fire that had been rekindled within her. "Let us get to work," she said, her voice firm, her hands already moving, a woman of quiet habits and sharp eyes. A woman who smelled of cinnamon and flour, and a woman who was ready for a war.